Okay, we've moved into the last section of Genesis, and it has to do with Jacob's son, Joseph. And as we read through the life of Joseph, we'll notice that he suffers before he gains authority. I think this is one of the main themes of Joseph's life that we are to gather. He's obedient before God elevates him. He dies before he rules, just as Christ went to the cross before he went to the throne. Sacrifice is the preliminary to authority. There's a popular and true aphorism that knowledge is power. It likely comes from Thomas Hobbes' book, Leviathan. Knowledge is power, or sometimes it's translated, wisdom is power. Remarkably, Carl Jung once warned against unearned wisdom. Beware of unearned wisdom. And when he said this, he was speaking of psychedelics, psychedelic drugs, which gives you access to this unearned wisdom. And this is really just another way of saying sorcery. Beware of sorcery, because sorcery gives you access to things that is knowledge that God forbids. It gives you this kind of unearned wisdom. And as Samuel says, or God says through Samuel, sorcery is the sin of rebellion. And it's really actually not wisdom, though, because what's happening when you're entering into this psychedelic drug experience is you're being taught by demons. You're given access to the unseen realm, but then demons are giving you this kind of faux wisdom. It's just like the serpent back in the garden. There's this appearance of wisdom, but it's tied with a whole bunch of falsehood. And this is really where we get a lot of the Vedic religions, the Bhagavad Gita and things like this. They worship the soma, and the soma is a plant, likely, that induced these psychedelic experiences, which gave them access to demons, and demons taught them all these things like everything is one, and there's no distinction between creator and creature, and all this kind of stuff. And that reality is Maya, that it's just an illusion. It's exactly the opposite of the Christian worldview. And so people enter into these things thinking that it's wisdom, but it's not God's wisdom, which is pure, but it's satanic wisdom, which is like these little wisdom pills laced with cyanide. That's what these demons are giving you. Beware of unearned wisdom is something that has been touted by the prophets and evangelists of this kind of modern ressourcement of sorcery, like Joe Rogan and Terence McKenna. These proponents of drug use have said this phrase, and even though they don't abide by it, they don't practice it, they still know that it's there, and they even reference it to their own drug use. So they're like Balaam. They're like a pagan prophet, and they're correct in their warnings, even though they're not consistently applying it to themselves. And beware of unearned wisdom is just another way of saying don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's really what that is about. It's another way of recognizing original sin. So these men are engaged in the sin of grasping at unearned wisdom while knowing that one of their prophets has warned them against this. It's grasping at knowledge that isn't ours to take. Adam and Eve bypassed obedience, they bypassed suffering, and they received knowledge of good and evil. They took a shortcut. They gained real and actual knowledge of their nakedness, but they also gained what's called the noetic effects of sin. It scrambled their brains, and we're still struggling to unscramble our brains today. And that's what the mind of Christ does. It unscrambles these things. So they gained real knowledge, but they gained the noetic effects of sin, the taint of sin in their minds. God does grant knowledge of good and evil. He does grant wisdom. He also grants prophetic visions, and he does give words of knowledge, but he does so on his own terms. It's only Satan and his demons who give this false wisdom and allow you to essentially manipulate them. Take this amount of drugs and you'll get access to the unseen realm. They will grant false wisdom to those who are seeking to gain it apart from suffering and obedience. You just smoke some DMT and you're automatically granted these kinds of things. There's no cross, there's no suffering, there's no obedience required. So Satan offered a similar thing to Christ. I would say it's the exact same thing. Bow before me and I'll give you the kingdoms of the world. And that is what shamanistic ayahuasca shamans are doing. They're saying, take some ayahuasca and you get access to the unseen realm. It's a shortcut to wisdom without the cross. And it's not even really wisdom at all. So if you are taking ayahuasca, if you are smoking DMT, if you are smoking marijuana, if you're doing acid or MDMA or whatever these psychedelics may be, you are taking a shortcut. You are recapitulating the original sin. You are grasping at this tree that you are not permitted to grasp from. You are listening to the serpent. You are bowing down and worshiping Satan in exchange for unearned wisdom. You are forsaking your cross. And Jesus says, if you don't pick up your cross and follow him, you're not worthy of him. The Christian has access to the unseen realm only when the Holy Spirit grants it, which he may grant to whoever he chooses by his own good pleasure. And he does grant wisdom to those who obey him and those who wait for him to grant it, to those who maintain a sober mind, and to those who have a posture of submission to God alone and not to anything else. And to those who go to the cross first, then it is granted them wisdom and authority. This reminds us of our need to confess.